right. Well, happy Monday.
Yes, it is.
Yes, the sun is out right now.
Right now. Oh,
So,
man. Yeah.
Taking advantage of that and
It might not be that way in 10 minutes.
Probably won't
It's like
be.
just the way it's been.
It's crazy. Hey, so before we really get into anything, I just thought after yesterday, we might just have a quick airplane safety conversation.
About that.
Because I'm a little worried about you, dude.
Yeah,
you,
man.
You
I'm just
flew
not.
to Bosnia and back. I know you don't love flying, but
yeah.
you still have to get on an airplane sometimes. So are you gonna be safe? Did you pay attention to the people when they were?
So here's what I did both flights. The flight down, we were in the very back, right next to all the stewardesses and all the staff.
They're called flight attendants now.
Flight attendants. Yeah. Okay, flight attendants. Okay, that's great. Because I said yesterday stewards and stewardesses. And I'm like, that didn't sound right.
Flight
but
attendant.
I was including everybody, it just didn't sound right.
Yeah.
And then on the flight back, we sat right in that bubble where it's like, hey, if this thing goes down, can you help open the door? And I'm like, yeah, sure, I got it.
Sure.
So then there was
how does that work?
a flight attendant there too. So
Yeah.
I just surround myself with flight attendants.
That is, I suppose, one way.
It is a good way.
The life rafts, right? They come out of the exits. It's a personal life vest, right? That goes on you, and it self-inflates. Because you were talking about you were worried that someone would have to come over and
there's this thing that you pull to self-inflate, but if it doesn't work, then you got to put a straw in your mouth and start. I'm like, I'm just not digging what's happening. So anyway,
just
hey,
giggling
it is,
while you were talking about
it. Is what it is.
Entertaining. Yeah, we're getting on a plane in a couple weeks. Gotta go to visit family, and so I was like, oh man, okay, not taking the Billy Birch flight
good for
safety
you, man.
course. I'm
good
gonna
for you.
Just wait and see how they talk to us. Hey, but yesterday was really good. It was kind of a challenging one, right?
Yeah,
because nobody likes to. Well, some people like to be challengers, but it's really hard to have those conversations where you're like, hey, I think you have something going on here, and I'm seeing this, and I know I hate when I feel like I have to have those. So it was good to talk about the difference between discernment and judgment, the way that you were yesterday.
Yeah,
That was really awesome.
Anytime Jesus takes the time to use a parable, it means he's got something to teach, but it's not just something he wants to teach, just throw it out there, but he wants us to get a better understanding of it. And so every time we come to the parables, it's very practical, day-to-day stuff. And when we were talking about the parable yesterday of, man, look, don't point out the speck in somebody else's eye and forget that you got a log in your own eye. It's it's just basically saying, man, it's real easy to criticize.
Yeah, it
it's
is.
real easy to be a what do they call that? A armchair quarterback. Some people call it the Monday morning quarterback. Something, you know what I mean, or whatever it is, because it's easy to do that.
Kind of a backseat driver type of concept.
It's easy to criticize. It's one of the most easiest things to do because we would do it a different way, but that doesn't mean that anyway.
That it's the wrong
so
way.
Jesus is just like, hey, we want to help people. We want each other to help each other, but we have to do it in the right way.
Yes.
And that's why my question was not, do we judge? Should we judge? Should we discern?
Right.
But what kind of judge are you?
Yeah.
That's the real question.
How are we doing this?
Yeah.
I loved when you're looking at the list. There were a couple moments it felt like Family Feud. You kept turning around and you were like, discernment says, and I was like, man, Steve Harvey up there.
Right.
It was a great distinction. It was really challenging for me just to look at and say, how am I usually approaching these things?
Yeah.
But there's two sides to those conversations, right? And we talked a lot about how to go about approaching a conversation if you're feeling like you need to call something out in somebody. But what we didn't talk a lot about was, how do I receive that? And I thought that'd be helpful to kind of this morning, because it's not fun to be on the receiving end of that, just like it's not not
really
fun
good
to have
point.
to go to it. So
he didn't say much about that. I think his point more was to the people that are being critical and judgmental and condemning, and things like that. But you're right, it can be very difficult, and usually is when somebody comes, hey, we got to talk, man. We have to talk about some things.
And I think that
receiving that is hard.
I think one of the things is like, in order to care for each other in the church, we have to model receiving it well as much as we have to model giving it well, because in order for people to feel comfortable coming to us with things, you know, if we just like take their head off every time they come at us with something, maybe rightfully, maybe wrongfully, but if they're coming to us with a humble spirit, trying to give us that discernment type of judgment, we want to love them well by listening and receiving it. So, and
I like what you said. If they're coming humbly, then we should reciprocate. We should meet them there with that kind of humility. I mean, a teachable heart is a big deal. I mean, even when you're working in somewhere, a workplace, or hiring somebody, or being hired by somebody, or whatever it is, man, teachability is a big deal. Yeah, because it shows somebody's heart. It says, hey, I want to get better. I don't know everything. And it's that same exact attitude when somebody comes at us. You know, reminds me of there's a passage in Ephesians that I've used over and over. I'm going to read the second half of the passage, and it says, "Let everything you say be good and helpful, so that your words will be an encouragement to those who hear them." Right? Yeah. And so there's a little bit of both sides to that. Sure. Right. Let all your words be an encouragement. You come because you want to be a healing entity, not somebody that's always condemning. Right. But the other side of it is that if you receive it, you will be encouraged. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's a guarantee that you will be encouraged if you hear that. And I think that's it's hard. And I think there's even a couple sides to that. Like, certain people have come to me and have pointed out things. I'm like, wow, man, you're so right. I just didn't see that, you know? Yeah. There have been others that have come to me and I'm like, they haven't researched, they ask no questions, they don't know what they're talking about, they are completely off base. I'm not even kidding. Yeah. I'm trying to be as humble as I can. And I'm like, I'm really sorry I just don't know what. So you try and take that 10% rule where when somebody, you know, comes at you hard and you're like, I just don't see if it's found. You try and learn 10% from it, but sometimes, man, I don't know what to do with that. Yeah. You know what I mean?
And I think there's this special, exciting part of your job specifically where when you're leading a church as a pastor, oftentimes you do receive a lot of emails.
You get opinions and things and it, you know, it just comes with it. And thankfully most people, I know their hearts are good. They just see things a different way. They haven't been the churches they used to, you know, they've grown up in or something maybe a little different. And there are certain times where it's like, oh, this is going to be a hard conversation because maybe I shouldn't say it this way, but I got to straighten out I got to straighten them out, man. Look, you're not seeing this right. But there are many times when those emails have come like, wow, I got to think, dude, that's a great point. Right back. Great point. Yeah. I will work on that. Or something like that.
Part of leading well for anyone, not just you. This isn't like hey, how does Billy Birch handle these conversations? This is like, part of being a leader of faith, and we disciple people around us all the time, whether we know it or not, right? And so part of leading well towards Christ is in recognizing, like, okay, I've gone through this, I've approached it with a humble heart, I feel confident that this is mostly wrong. Yeah. I need to respond, but like, you respond in a humble way, that can help.
I like that. Yeah.
Still be, like, you can still be edifying the
to
church,
each
right?
other.
Yeah. We want to be building up.
Yeah, exactly. And even when you get, now let's take it to a friend level. Mm-hmm. You know, when a friend comes to you and there is sincere love. Yeah. And you know the person loves you and they have your best interest in mind, it's way easier to take. You know what I mean? When somebody comes to you that's a friend or an acquaintance or whatever, and you're like, I don't know why they just have a critical eye toward me, or that I've never felt like this. Yeah. Really, you know, it's just really harder. Yeah. But either way, we have to come with a humble way of approaching or humble way of accepting. And I think Jesus talks about humility so often, and it's just the way he talks about life. It's the way he that's what he did.
Yeah.
His life was all about just being humble. He even said we need to approach life and live like little children coming to him, where it's like in humility, in an excitement, innocence, all that stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There were a lot of things in Jesus's life, and then also in the lives of the early church leaders, Paul and Peter and some of those guys, where people would kind of come hard at them, and they would just sort of walk away. And there was not a constant need for rebuttal, and there wasn't a constant need for proving correctness. They kind of just let their lives do that. And having the confidence in Christ and saying, like, this person's opinion of me is not going to change my standing with the Lord. So do I really need to engage in this? If it's not going to be edifying, we don't need to. And it might even be better not to sometimes, which is wild, because that's where a lot of humility comes in, because it really does. Like, you're just gonna walk away from it.
I know. I know. It's hard. And even yet again, the humility that the disciples had to display, and Jesus said some hard things to them sometimes. Like you're all gonna walk away. You're all gonna leave me. They're like, what are you talking? You know? And yet they continue to follow their master, and they continue to say, look, he loves us so much. We know that. The Gospels only give us so much of Jesus' life and his teaching and everything. But all the hanging out, all the good times, I'm sure they thought, he loves me so much that I will take it. You know what I mean? But, I read through Ecclesiastes, and I read a verse that says, better to be criticized by a wise person than to be praised by a fool. I love some of the wisdom sayings. There's some in Ecclesiastes. Obviously, there's a ton of them in Proverbs. And it's like, because a person who is wise is going to criticize. It doesn't mean in a bad way. It just means, hey, man, I got to point something out.
The constructive kind.
In our culture, I don't know if other cultures this is the same, but we've lost a little bit of what we may have had 100 years ago with apprenticeship. Apprenticeship means, you start a trade and somebody's pointing out everything you're doing right and wrong. And you have to learn, you're not doing that right. Okay, how do I do it right? And I'm sure some bosses were much better at that than others. But either way, the person accepting it wanted to get better at their craft, and so they had to accept it in a whole lot of different ways. And there may have been a lot more of that going on to get us used to that. Whereas these days, maybe not as much. Sports brings that out. Coaches are like, no, that's not how you do it. What were you thinking? Or something like that.
When I think something that I always remember my parents saying to me was like, your coach wouldn't be saying that if he didn't think that you could do it. Or if she didn't think you could do it. Like it was the moment that your coach stopped giving you that feedback was when you knew you were in trouble. Not when they were saying, approach this way. Next time you'll do it better. If you know that you made a mistake and the coach just said nothing about it, you're like, oh man,
that means he's writing me off. I will be on the bench within days. I think the friendship factor is huge. Proverbs says, as iron sharpens iron, so a friend sharpens a friend, or a friend sharpens another, however your version says that. That means there's going to be sparks. That means sometimes it's going to hurt. Sometimes it's going to be like, man, you're taking metal off to sharpen it. So it's like, that doesn't feel good. You look at iron sharpening iron, and man, it's a pretty violent process.
It is.
You know what I mean?
This verse always kind of makes me chuckle to myself, because it's been the main verse for every men's retreat that's ever existed, and not a single women's retreat ever.
That's so funny.
Right? The women are like, iron sharpening iron. That sounds violent. We're not going part of that. But that really applies to all believers, I think, and men respond really differently than women do to conflict, right? Y'all can have a little battle and then kind of move on with your lives.
Man. Fight it out. Best friends after that.
Women is harder, but still needs to happen.
But the goal is sharper. We're sharper. In the end, when we're able to do that and somebody's able to accept it, all of us are sharper and more useful, more efficient. We're actually doing what we're created to do and do well.
Yeah.
That's the goal of it, you know? Even in that same chapter, there's Proverbs 27:6. Wounds from a sincere friend are better than many kisses from an enemy.
Yeah.
The enemy, it's fake. It's a fake thing. It's like, you're acting like you love me, but you really don't. You don't have my best interest in mind. You just want to make a show of it, or you want to try and convince me in a salesman kind of way that you are. But it's like wounds from a sincere friend. And that's what we're talking about here. That we have to be on the receiving end of a sincere friend and say, okay, wow, I'll work on that.
Yeah.
I'll do that.
And
Hard
that
to do.
Makes me think of, in Jesus' last days, Peter wounded him in walking away.
Good point.
Judas kissed him and betrayed him.
That's a great point.
Right?
Man.
Like,
that's a great point.
We saw the church built on Peter.
Yeah.
Who had made missteps, right? But Judas, who kissed him as their very last interaction, was clearly the enemy.
That was clearly the enemy. And even Jesus bringing Peter back when he was risen and just saying, hey, do you love me? Then take care of my sheep, and said that 3 times and brought him back and everything. And you're right, man. The church that's what Jesus said. The church is going to be founded on you, man. We're going to turn the world upside down.
Yeah.
But there was a whole lot of give and take with Jesus and the disciples. And there was a whole lot of humility that needed to happen. And I just think that's a good way. It's a good posture for us.
Yeah, absolutely.
In just about every area of life, if we can just be humble.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean to be a doormat. That doesn't mean that at all. Yep. That's a whole different. It just means to be humble in our attitude and what God is trying to do, because we just want to get better.
Yeah. Yeah, I think something that you said yesterday, towards the end of the message, you talked about giving others the benefit of the doubt as much as we give ourselves, at least as much as we give ourselves the benefit of the doubt. If we can just approach these harder conversations, in a phrase, just to sum up the last 15 minutes or so, let's approach it with the benefit of the doubt.
Such a good idea.
Evaluate what is being said.
I love that.
And then that's a good starting point. But hey,
it's
your birthday tomorrow. So
it is, man.
I thought I would just end our time with saying happy birthday.
Thanks.
For sure.
Awesome.
For sure.
All right.
So if you see Billy this week, tell him happy birthday. I won't say how old you're going to be, but...
Yeah, cool. Thanks, man.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, have a good week.
See you.